種のアイドルハーフェン、次々国王となる男だ。
Previously, he had been bullied for 5 years, causing him to resort to jerking to anime girls online in his musty room until one fateful day. Mid-jerk, he gets encased in a strange light where he is summoned into a new world. Upon arriving, he rizzes up various girls and makes them his servant until present day when he is being forced to attend school. Episode 7. After successfully finding the ice dragon, Liza, within the woods, our protagonist, Hart decides to take her in as a servant. Upon introducing her to the fam, nobody pays any mind to the fact that she is a dragon. They all treat her the same, making us question Gold's state of mind as the head of the estate. Regardless, they go along with teaching her how to properly be a maid. To start, Flay decides to take her under his stead, showing her random useless tactics to make her seem better than she is. They then begin sweeping up the dirt, making Flay wonder what this girl's deal is. Following this, they move on to washing the dishes, where Liza once again outshines her master. With Flay breaking almost every dish she cleans, it makes us wonder how she got the job in the first place. They then move on to cooking, where once again, Liza makes Flay look like a fool. Even Gold recognizes her skills in cooking, commenting that this food is much better than the junk Flay has been cooking. This makes her depressed, but she has no choice but to try and improve herself. Not only is Liza better than her at everything, she gives credit where credit is due, giving all credit to Flay. Later that week, Liza continues her efforts as a maid, this time waking up Charl in the morning. She proceeds to show her various things, including dragon magic. Although she struggles at first with Liza's guidance, Charl learns lots of things from her. This continues, and the days go by with not only Charl learning more, but also Liza learned about how to properly be a maid. After a little while, Charl is able to use a large-scale fireball attack, making him wonder what kind of monster she will become. Not only is Liza teaching Charl directly, but she also happens to be using water magic to do the laundry. On top of her perfect cleaning and teaching, she doesn't complain about all the work, rather thanking them for giving her something to do. Because of how perfect she seems, Charl asks Liza if they can become friends together. As expected, Liza accepts her friend request, making Charl her real friend within this world. While he watches this, Hart suddenly realizes that Liza is the perfect attendant he has been looking for to follow his clone around at school. He considers taking her under his stead, but when she shows how friendly she is with Charl, he recognizes he can't take her away. Because of this, he starts scheming on how he can break the two up, knowing he won't find someone perfect like her again. Later that week, when Hart does his usual loafing around, he finds Charl in his house, complaining about not having enough anime to watch. Before we continue, let's take a moment to answer the question of the day. How many total anime have you watched during your lifetime? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out in the next video. Now back to the recap. Then as she leaves, he informs Charl that next week he will be attending school, so he might need her help. Upon hearing this, Charl calls for an emergency roundtable meeting with all of his highest level generals. She calls upon the various monsters under his command and tells them that he will be going to the capital for school. Once they hear this, they question why they never learned of this until just now. Charl stops them from making a ruckus, informing them there must be some deeper reason behind it all. Flay considers burning it down, but is stopped by Charl. With the monsters thinking that Hart is secretly the Demon King, they decide not to inform Charl of his true identity. They wonder why someone like the Demon King would need to attend school in the first place, with his talents being so high. Charl then moves on to the main task at hand, telling them with Hart being gone, she won't be able to watch anime. This stuns the others, wondering what they will do without their daily anime intake. Charl then explains that based on the anime she has watched, she can conclude that school is a demonic thing that is made to hurt students. With the others not knowing what a school is really for, they all believe her and decide they need to do something about this evil school. Although this is the case, they still need to proceed with caution to make sure their group stays secretive. Liza then asks if she should talk with Hart about this, suspecting if it's really that big of a deal. Charl quickly shuts her down and decides they will work in secret to ensure Hart has a better future. Even after hearing this, Liza decides to snitch on the others explaining it all to Hart soon after. Although she tells him she is still unsure of whether the school is a large, evil organization, so she asks Hart. He tells her that she is right in thinking this, informing her the school is a big enemy to him. Because of how strong they are, he asks Liza to follow him to school, knowing he will need help defeating them. With this in mind, Liza decides to accept his request, thinking she will be helping him solve a greater good. Meanwhile, the maids of the estate are having a break amongst each other. One of the maids talks about her boyfriend cheating on her, so Flay offers to kill him for her. With every issue the maids talk about, she thinks it's best to kill them. They question when she will become more normal. Following this, Flay takes Charl outside to talk about her uniform. With the original maid uniform being unable to contain her massive chest, she ended up getting a custom-made uniform. She has never once changed out because of Hart's good words to her when he was a baby. As they talk, Liza flies overhead, so Charl asks if she can do it as well. Although she can't, Flay says she can, putting her arms above her head and jumping around. Despite just jumping, Charl thinks she actually flew, so she praises her. As she explains this, Charl's mom enters, telling her she's way too young to attempt flying magic. Once this happens, Flay immediately enters Hart's room, asking for some help. Without hesitation, Hart provides her with a little plan that already has the flying magic embedded in it. After a full day of playing around, Charl asks to take a bath, but Flay has other plans. Instead, she guides her to a river where she jumps inside to wash off. They then go to talk with Liza, asking her what she does in her free time. Other than her maid duties, Liza just sleeps and reads, living the ideal life that Hart wants. He also learns that she only has to eat once a week, making him really wish he was a dragon. Then later that week, while Hart is chilling at home, he's asked a dumb question by Liza. She asks him to explain how the door works, thinking that it's a complicated type of magic. Hart informs her that it just uses hinges, so it's nothing interesting. She takes this as him saying it's ancient magic, making her stunned. Episode 8. Now, after a long wait, Hart sets out for the evil school accompanied by Liza. Not only is he the one arriving, but also Lias, Hart's blood brother and so-called rival. With him getting beaten to a pulp years back, he wants to enter this school in order to find the true source of Hart's power. His sister agrees to this, her also being curious of the extent of his power. She called him obsessed with Hart, so Lias reveals that she also has a bit of a crush on him. With her demanding from the king that she won't attend school unless he attends, he exposes her to us all. They then move on to talking about some weird religion that is apparently controlling the school, with the group being called the Lucifix, that worship the high-ranking demons. It seems like the school actually is an evil organization. Not only have they taken this over, but they plan on overthrowing the capital, taking the lead for the entire kingdom. Lias suspects that his mother is actually in charge of this operation ever since she got the collar put on her. He wonders who could even place such a thing on her, thinking she was the strongest person. On top of this, she doesn't talk with the king at all, making their family a big mess. He wonders if his mother is attempting to take out the king, knowing she would ascend to the throne if she did. Once Marianne hears this, she proposes that they ask Hart for help, thinking he can fix their problem. She reminds Lias that they don't know how powerful he really is, considering the fact that he could potentially overthrow the evil group. Lias then reminds her that they could also ask the dragon that was reigning through the northern lands. As they talk of this, the queen enters the room, still with the collar intact. She asks them what they were talking about, grabbing Marianne's neck in the process. She tells her that she has no right to look at her, bringing her to the verge of death. Eventually, she drops her and claims it was just a joke, telling Marianne not to gossip behind others' backs. She then informs Lias that Hart will be attending the school as well. She explains that he is probably lonely because of him coming from the country, so she needs to get along with him. In the process, she demands from him that he get as much information regarding the Black Knight from him. He agrees to her orders after seeing her bloodlust, making her realize just how scary his mother is. He wonders if he dragged Hart into their family's issues, so he curses at himself. Meanwhile, Hart is seen playing games as usual, until Charl informs him it's time to go to school. He tries to not go, but is forced to anyway, causing Flay to beg him once again to let her come with him. Hart informs her that he has bigger plans, so she needs to watch over Charl, leaving her in the process. Hart then uses a teleportation spell to get outside of the royal capital, showing he can use it anywhere. Although they got close, they are still a bit ways off from the capital, so they regret not teleporting closer. As they talk about how to get there, they see a monster chasing after a carriage. Because of this, Hart decides to help them, but makes sure to hide his identity in the process. With a single spell, he saves people on the carriage from falling off, then gets ready to fight the monster. Before he does, however, a white-haired girl emerges and faces off against it. Hart assumes she can take it, but instantly she gets knocked off her feet. Upon seeing this, he decides to intervene, taking it down with a single hit. This surprises the girl, so she thanks him but still has injuries from the initial hit. After seeing this, Heart heals her and impresses the rest of the people, including some random kid. He calls Heart super cool while the others wonder who this guy is acting like a hero. Following this, Heart fixes the carriage and asks them where they're going. She informs him that they are going into the capital, causing Heart to remember this girl, her wearing the same uniform as the school. He then meets back up with Liza and begins walking to the capital. As they walk, Liza tells Heart that she felt something strange leaking out of the white-haired girl from before. It takes some time, but Heart eventually arrives at the school's front gate, where he finds various people waiting around. With some clearly being rich and some broke, he just wants to go home. After he gets past this gate, he is forced to take on many tests and fill out tons of info. Finally, he gets this done and heads to the room, but instantly he goes home. He finds Charles and Flay waiting for his arrival, explaining it was super tiring. With this, he lies down and the girls talk about what to do in order to help him. They talk amongst each other and eventually decide on going out to eat within the royal capital. With Flay being a demon, however, Charles provides fake cat ears so she can move around nonchalantly. This doesn't impress Heart, so he just uses magic to make her look normal. They then head into the capital and search around for a place to get some food. It doesn't take long before Charles finds a place, asking Heart to buy them food. Of course, he follows suit and takes them out, leading to Charles explaining some things. She points to various places in the capital and asks if they can do some shopping. Although he is reluctant at first, he accepts her request and goes on the date along with Charles. With this being his first ever date, his heart begins thumping, realizing that to the average person they would recognize them as siblings. As a normal date goes, they window shop, then buy some random jewelry. To end it off, they head to a park where Charles stumbles into the white-haired girl. Instantly, she recognizes Heart, asking if he was the man from earlier today. He tells her that he is just a level 2, so there is no way he is the person she is talking about. She then leaves them be, and Charles tells Heart that she felt some strange energy radiating from her. Episode 9. After a couple days of being at the school, he soon learns that his clone was ordered to take a test for his magic. With him being an idiot, he was unsure of what to put on the test, so Heart considers maybe he will be expelled. He thinks of this as an opportunity, but decides to head to the school to take the test himself. Upon trying to sneak in for the test, his teacher notices him and sits him down. With it being a large empty classroom, he wonders where everybody else is at. Regardless, he sits down to take the test, hoping to fail everything quickly and get expelled. To his surprise, he actually doesn't know anything, so he wonders what to do. He decides to just put no clue on all of the answers, but eventually decides it's boring to do just this. He answers a few of the questions just for fun, thinking that he will fail regardless. With the last bit being about ancient magic, he decides to do good on it, so that his parents don't suspect what he has been doing in his free time. The professor then takes his test and asks to assess his mana level. Heart tries to dodge it, claiming to be a level 2, but they decide to test him anyway. When he heads to the office to get assessed, he finds a short girl who happens to be his professor. She tells him he looks cool and that he is perfect for her plans. She then introduces herself as Tyr, someone who studies ancient magic within the school. Despite her being small and shabby looking, she claims to be someone of high importance within the school. This surprises Heart, so he asks how old she is. This makes her excited, thinking he is looking at her favorably, so she tells him to control himself. After she finishes talking about random stuff, she moves on to looking at his exam. She notices something written on it and moves on to checking his mana levels. Heart assumes it will just read level 2 per usual, but it erupts within the ball, destroying it in the process. He thinks that he did something wrong and that she will be mad at him, hoping to be kicked out, but he gets the opposite. She tells him that he is amazing to possess such high levels of mana, surpassing even herself. She also explains that the magical balls have never been broken from mana, so he is surely special. She then informs him that the questions he put no clue on were trick ones nobody could get right. With him getting the others correct, she sees him as a generational talent, claiming she wants to take him under her wing. Instantly, he denies her request, showing he has no intentions of learning from some little kid. He then heads back to his room and explains the situation to his clone, asking him to do good. His clone tells him that there is no way he can fulfill their expectations, but he will try anyway. Later that day, Charles presents the clone with a gun, offering to have him put himself out of the school life. This clone introduces himself as Heart C, claiming to just be a slave for Heart to use. Despite him sharing all of Heart's memories, he has no mana to himself, making him an empty shell. He then heads to the first event and rushes off once it's over, hoping to have an easy rest of the day. As he walks back to his room, he finds some noble-looking guy walking tall and mighty, causing him to cower down. Right after he walks by, the noble calls out the white-haired girl, causing her to stop. This in turn causes Heart to run into her chest, making her surprised. After this happens, the noble approaches her and asks what she is doing, not bowing down to him. He explains he is the vice president of the student council, so she needs to pay respect to him. She informs him that she didn't know that, so the noble tells Heart C to tell her the rules. As he says this, Heart C acts in pain and tries to run away, but the noble doesn't like this. Instead, he fires magic at Heart, thus knocking him to the ground. He thinks that it hurt Heart, but thanks to the barrier placed on him, it did absolutely nothing. This makes the others stunned to withstand an attack like that, so Heart plays it off. He acts injured to lower suspicion, but this only makes them question his motives more. The white-haired girl then approaches Heart C and apologizes for making him endure the noble's attack. This only angers the noble more, so he prepares more attacks, hoping to show them a lesson. Because he doesn't stop his actions, Heart C is forced to use the gun, thinking he will die. Following this, he runs away and meets back up with Heart later that day. He explains everything that happened, making Heart realize he made the right decision to send a clone. Regardless, he decides to give him a break from school life and take it upon himself to attend. Because of this, he learns that the noble his clone shot is proposing a duel against him. The delivery girl explains that if he doesn't accept it, will only make things worse for him in the end. With this in mind, he realizes he must take on the duel even though he doesn't want to. He then uses his screen to check the surroundings where he finds the white-haired girl talking with the other girl. He wonders what they are doing but decides not to pry any further. Meanwhile, the white-haired girl is seen talking with the noble, asking him nicely to call off the duel. She explains that with him being injured, he's in no shape to do a duel. Watching over this is Heart, somehow still getting front row seats to this whole ordeal. He watches as the white-haired girl tries to beg for his forgiveness, showing no shame. He refuses, of course, and he eventually proposes that the only way he will call off the duel is if she dances around naked. Although she denies it at first, she is forced to accept his request, knowing he won't let up otherwise. Heart wonders if he should step in, but likes this just as much as the others do, so he keeps watching. Just before she takes off the final part, she stops, showing she is embarrassed to do this. Episode 10. Following this, when he heads back to school, people praise Heart for standing up to the noble and getting him to avoid the duel. In reality, Heart C has to deal with all of this, having various people gossip about his skills. As he walks back to his room, various people stop him asking for him to talk with them. Heart only sees this as a pain, however, wishing that he didn't have to deal with such antics. In particular, the short professor forces him to follow her, giving him not a single second to breathe in peace. After following her to her room, she explains various classes that he could take. With one of them being ancient magic, she asks him if he has any interest in such classes. He tells her he likes it a bit, so she persists in attempting to make him work under her. Then suddenly Lias arrives, which is followed by Marianne. At first, Heart didn't recognize Lias for his sudden change in appearance, but he realizes soon after Marianne appears. She asks how he is doing, to which he explains he has been bugged by everyone since he arrived. She then proposes that he join her club so that he can escape from people, but this advancement is stopped by the other two. Lias argues with Ter on who Heart should follow, but neither side can reach an agreement. Eventually, Marianne joins in as well, and they all press him for who he will follow. To make things even worse, the white-haired girl appears, asking Heart if they can talk together. At first, Heart sees it as a nuisance, but he soon realizes that she can act as his scapegoat. This leads to him running behind her until they finally lose the others. She tells him that she is curious about something regarding him. She questions whether he is the same person that she met yesterday. She explains that comparing him and his clone, they feel like entirely different people. Once she says this, Heart puts up a barrier to hide any info that may leak. With this up, he asks her how he feels different from the other person. She talks about his aura once again, saying it feels entirely different than the other one. Once he hears this, Heart realizes she must be someone who can sense mana much like Flay. Because of this, he asks her if she is a demon, so she begins inspecting herself. She tells him that although she isn't, she would like to know why he thinks that way. Obviously, Heart can't reveal why, so he changes the question to tell her that he hopes she will treat him and the other Heart the same. He then asks her why she is talking to him in the fist place. She starts by thanking him for saving her from the noble and then asks him for a favor. She asks him to be friends with her, showing she doesn't really have any. Before he can answer, she thanks him for becoming her friend, blushing in the process. She explains that she has no other friends and that she has had a rough upbringing. When she was born, she got abandoned as a child 4 total times, each caregiver throwing her out. Although she isn't sure of the exact reason, she thinks that it must be due to her lack of communication. With her being socially inept, she was never able to convey her true feelings of gratitude to her caregivers, making her get thrown out until a priest took her in. Upon hearing this, he tells her that he can be her friend, but he also doesn't have any making him a bad person to become friends with. She only takes this as an advantage, thinking Heart is in the same situation he is in. With Heart's previous friends bullying him into doing things, he wonders if that is what he should do. He then asks her what club she is in, to which he learns she is under the crazy professor. With this being said, he decides to join that club as well to hopefully make them better friends. This makes her overjoyed, so she smiles deeply at Heart, making him blush. Now that they are friends, he introduces himself to her, and we finally learn her name. Later that evening, the other girls that Heart is in contact with are seen taking a bath, being lazy. They wish Heart wasn't at school, commenting how boring it is without him. As they talk about this, Charl gets an idea, so she heads out, hoping to put her plan in action. With her being gone, Flay talks more about her past, telling Liza that before she went under Heart, she was a close companion to the Demon King. She used to find various people to work under him, making their relationship good. The Demon King also wished to make a world with humans and demons coexisting. She reveals that the Demon King sacrificed himself to make this dream come true. Flay then informs her that she thinks the Demon King reincarnated himself in order to bring their relationship better. She also tells Liza that Heart is this Demon King who was reincarnated. She thinks that it was fate that she met with the Demon King right as he was reborn. Liza then questions what the Demon King's last name was, so she tells her, saying it was Iris. As she says this, the white-haired girl introduces herself with the same name, revealing she is this Demon King, not Heart. Now that Heart knows her name, he decides to run away, telling her friends don't need to always hang out. Iris persists, however, telling him as friends they need to learn more about each other. With no other option, Heart invites her to his room, not realizing that it will cause more problems. He decides to take her into his room where he finds Charl waiting for him. She asks who this girl is, and Heart explains it's his new friend. This makes her jealous, so she tells Iris that she's going to be Heart's first bride. Upon hearing this, Iris questions if this is normal talk between siblings, her finding it a bit weird. Regardless, they enter the room together, and Charl gets to talking. She tells Iris that Heart is someone that she should fear, but she can't reveal everything. She tells her that Heart is someone much more important than she thinks, calling him a transcended person. Iris buys this and asks Heart who he truly is. Before she gets an answer, Charl tells them that she needs to leave, having prior arrangements. Heart then wonders how he can teleport her back, not wanting to show Charl his teleportation magic. Because of this, he covers her eyes and teleports Charl away, acting like nothing happened. Episode 11. The next morning, Heart decides to sleep at his lake house, waking up alongside Charl. She then explains his schedule to him, ensuring that he attends all of the classes. With him being placed in the mid-level class, he is simply a C ranker. He then inspects the rest of his classes and realizes that Charl picked all hard classes for him. He wonders if this will help him or not, but he eventually realizes a harder class will be easier to fail out of. Then before he leaves, Charl gives him a goodbye hug, wishing him a good day at school. Upon arriving at school, he meets with Iris, who he introduces to Liza. Once Liza hears her name, she instantly thinks of the Demon King but doesn't say it. They instead walk to class normally until Iris arrives at the A call, showing she isn't some nobody. Liza then asks Heart whether she is really a demon or not, her not being able to tell. Heart explains that even if she is a demon, she acts like a human, so it's not really a big deal. He then enters his class and notices lots of glares in his direction. He pays it no mind, expecting at least this much from being in the C class. Now, with the start of class, the teacher announces that there is a test for them to take. Heart plans on failing it, but after inspecting it, he realizes how easy it is. He thinks that the teacher gave him an easy test on purpose to see if he will fail it to prove he is trying to fail out. With this in mind, Heart decides to just aim for a grade of 60, hoping to barely pass. Once he turns it in, the teacher informs the class that the average on the test is around a 20, everyone failing. He says even Class B would only get around a 50, so when he notices Heart getting a 60, he applauds him. The rest of the class follows suit, recognizing his high score on the test. The teacher then informs Heart that because he scored so high, he will make sure he moves up to A class. This leads to him going to Class A the next day, where he finds Iris and Lias fighting over him. They both try to get him to sit next to them, but they are soon interrupted when the teacher enters class, introducing herself as Oratoria. Instantly, Heart realizes she is definitely stingy. After she notices the three sitting close by, she walks up on them and tells them just because they are in Class A, they shouldn't get confident. She informs them she will make sure they are tasked with harder work than anyone else. To start, she inspects their magical potential, starting with Iris, who possesses all 4 elements. This makes her a bit happy, but after realizing she is only level 5, she asks what she has been doing her whole life, ordering her to sit down in the process. She then asks the class a difficult question, and somehow Hart answers it with ease. He thinks he said the wrong thing, so he cowers down, but after repeating himself, the teacher asks how he knows top-secret information. She reveals that recently someone gave them magic documents that are way ahead of time, but the person never revealed themselves. With this, she tells him he needs to report his teachings directly to the royal palace, showing how important it is. Following this, she asks him if he is actually the mysterious man who gave them the documents, causing him to deny it. In reality, it was some random information he had told Charles previously. After class, he heads to meet with Ter, finally deciding to become her student. This makes her overjoyed, so she starts jumping with joy, telling Hart they need to celebrate. You might wonder why Hart is doing all of this anyway, so he explains. With his clone getting lazy recently, he hasn't been able to force them into doing his job. He then tries to leave the class thinking he has already done enough by just showing up, but he is suddenly stopped. Appearing before him is the blonde noble he put a mark into, forcing his arm to be in constant pain. He sought guidance from Tyr, thinking she would have some way of helping him, but she has no clue how to release it. Iris then tries to see it, but realizes she has no clue how to fix it as well. She suggests that the only way it could be there is if it was non-elemental magic like barrier magic. With this being said, she asks Hart what he thinks non-elemental magic could be. He gives a random wrong answer, so Iris interrupts him, explaining it in detail. In conclusion, it's some ancient magic that none of them know how to use. She explains that one would have to be at least level 80 in order to use such magic, commenting on how advanced it is. She looks to Iris, suspecting her, but she informs them she is not behind it. With no other clues, she wakes the noble up and decides to ask him directly who did it. Although he tried to hide it at first, she tells him that it will never get off unless he spills the beans on who did it. Upon hearing this, he explains that it was done by some mysterious black figure. With their identity unknown, Tyr decides to investigate who it could be. She tells Hart that this figure matches the description from when he was in his province, and now they just happen to show up in the royal capital. She suspects him, asking him to reveal what he really knows. The more she talks, the more crazy she gets, so Hart is forced to act. He appears within his Black Knight form to lower suspicion, telling them to calm down. He tells Tyr that he was the one who placed the mark on him, asking her to stop being so crazy before he does anything. Eventually, she stops all her yapping, so Hart explains his demands, telling the noble he needs to apologize to Hart if he wants him to remove it. With no other option, he accepts, but as Hart tries to leave, he gets bound by Tyr's mana. She thinks this will surely trap him, but within an instant he breaks out of it, showing she is no match for him. On top of this, he completely immobilizes Tyr, making her even more intrigued by the Black Knight. She asks him to answer some of her questions, but he leaves before she can even ask one. Episode 12. Now, with Hart being confirmed as not the Black Knight, Tyr pours them drinks in celebration. Although he is confirmed to not be the knight, the other teacher still looks at him strangle. The random teacher tells Hart that they are similar, him also getting dragged into random things he doesn't want to. He explains that he was originally Tyr's teacher, but she ended up soon surpassing him. With her being so smart, she ended up ordering him around until he followed her to the academy and ended up becoming a teacher himself. Although Tyr may seem like some small child, she is actually referred to as the Great Sage by many people. He wishes that she would have done something else, other than study ancient magic, calling it useless. As he talks, Iris approaches him while completely wasted. She falls onto his lap, making Hart a bit happy. With this being his first female interaction since he was cloned, he goes along with her antics. Eventually, she lays on his meat and tells him that she is super happy for him to join the class with her. Once she expresses this, she falls asleep, leaving Hart to figure out how she gets home. Before he leaves, he decides to put her on a couch rather than take her home like a man. After doing this, Tyr approaches him, who also happens to be wasted. She tells Hart that although Iris has a lot of potential with her mana level, only being level 5, she is pretty weak. Although this may be the case, she thinks that she holds some sort of clue to figuring out more advanced magic. She then falls asleep abruptly, just like how Iris did, showing she can't handle her liquor. With her asleep now, he heads home without a care in the world. Meanwhile, the blonde noble is seen in a rage, thinking that Hart is ordering the Black Knight around. He tells his top guards to assassinate Hart along with anyone else inside of his room. With Hart currently being asleep, that includes Iris, Tyr, and the other random teacher. They decide to kill them anyways, despite their significance, preparing a large-scale attack. On top of this, they have a total of 20 assassins ready to strike. With all preparations done, they rush towards the estate, but are soon blocked by an invisible barrier. Because of this, they check the surrounding area, but find that the entire building is surrounded by this barrier. He then tries to break through it, which suddenly summons a door. He proceeds with caution, but upon opening it, he gets pulled inside. With this being done, they all use their most powerful magic at the door, but it sucks it all up, leaving no trace behind. Then suddenly more and more doors appear around the group, grabbing them within. This causes the leader of the assassins to prepare a powerful attack to launch at the next door that opens. Following this, the Black Knight exits and falls to the ground, but shortly after another one exits as well. They inspect the Black Knight but find their own companion within it, showing they just killed their ally. After this happens, Hart appears before them and explains that he sealed all of their mana so his attempts are pointless. With him being completely powerless before the Black Knight, he gives up, revealing it was the noble who put him up to this. Once he hears this, he heads to the noble's house and gives him back all of the assassins. He tries to deny it at first, but after Hart presents a screen displaying him clearly, telling the assassins to kill Hart, he's unable to deny it any further. Hart then tells him that the embedded chip on his shoulder clearly wasn't enough, so he needs to be punished for real. Upon hearing this, the noble injects himself with some serum, increasing his size and becoming a monster. This makes Hart realize how severe the situation is, but before he can act, he gets knocked out of the building. With him now faced off against a new foe, he wonders what to do. As he plans his attack, he gets a call from Charl, informing him she wants to know what he is up to. Hart explains that he is fighting a monster, telling her it's some ugly noble part of the evil organization controlling the school. Once she hears this, she asks if he will be all right, to which he reminds her who he is. He tells her he will fix everything, leaving it all in his hands. To start his subduction, he uses his barrier magic to try and reflect the monster's attacks, but it proves futile. He then tries to punch through the monster, but yet again, nothing happens. Because of this, he steps it up a notch, surrounding the monster in his barrier magic. Now, with its hands immobilized, he wonders how to kill it. But before he can, the monster tears its own arms off. Ong regenerates them instantly. This makes Hart question what he can do, but before he does anything, Charl calls him again. She tells him that after he ripped his arms off and regenerated it, he got a bit smaller. This makes Hart realize if he continues to let it regenerate, it will eventually die. He then uses his barrier magic to bring out hundreds of swords, sending them down like rain. Although it takes a minute, eventually the monster reverts back to its original form, revealing a naked blonde man. Once this is done, he approaches the noble, but his mind still seems to not be intact. With the noble running away like a dog, he decides to just leave it at that for the night. Meanwhile, Hart C wakes up amidst the night, wondering what it's like to have powers like Hart. He explains his past life and tells him that he only deserves to live a life like this. The following morning, Flay is seen pressing some old man. As she does, some thugs catcall her, hoping to get some action from her. They tell her they can help, thinking they will be able to overpower them, but the girls make quick work of them. They learn some information from the thugs and report it back to the round table with Charl at the head. She comes to the conclusion that there is trouble within the capital, so they should send out their army. With the noble turning into a monster, she believes that there is enough proof that the school is evil. All of the others agree to attack the school, while Hart is seen watching this all play out on his screen.